the faceless man of the road. There are stories that embed themselves in the soul like shards of glass, impossible to remove without tearing the flesh. My father entrusted one such story to me, one afternoon when the Arizona sun was stained with the same ochre tones as his skin, already surrendered to metastasis. He was never a man of fantasies or alcohol, much less of lies. His truths were as solid as the mountains that watched over his farm. That's why, when his eyes, already veiled by exhaustion, grew moist as he told me what he was about to share, I knew there wasn't a shred of invention in it. That wasn't a memory, it was a scar. And he gave me permission to share it, as if in doing so he could finally let it go. It was the dawn of the 70s, and the world, though he thought he knew it, was about to reveal its seams. My father, then a young man of 25 with the innate courtesy of the South and that silent tenacity forged only by the land, was returning from seeing my mother. His girlfriend then, my mother later, at her remote Arizona farm. 30 more minutes. That was all that separated him from the safety of his own home, on his own father's farm. The road, a ribbon of frayed asphalt, stretched out lonely under the immense, dark vault of the desert. Here, the crickets were the only orchestra and the wind the only messenger. And that night, something more. It was then that the night gave birth to a light. Not a lightning strike, nor the distant beacon of a town. It was a raw, white conflagration that enveloped everything. The mountains, previously ghostly silhouettes, were revealed with daytime clarity, as if the sun had exploded at its zenith. It was not of this world, my father told me, his voice raspy. That light did not warm, it did not promise a new day, it just existed, brutal and indifferent. A fleeting, icy thought crossed his mind, an atomic bomb? Had the Russians finally? But as quickly as it came, the light vanished, plunging the desert into an even deeper darkness, as if the world had forgotten how to breathe. My father tuned the radio, searching for a human voice, an explanation that could anchor him back to reality. He found only static, a chorus of white whispers that offered no comfort. Between 3 and 5 minutes. That's how my father calculated the time that passed until the darkness, now denser and heavier, was broken by an abnormality. A car. Stranded across the road, its silhouette broken and incongruous under the apathetic stars. Under any other circumstances at that hour and in that place, my father would have accelerated. But the good manners of his southern upbringing were too strong an anchor. He pulled his truck over to the side of the road, the high beams cutting through the gloom, and got out. He had barely taken a few steps on the crunching gravel when he saw it. In front of the wrecked vehicle, sitting in the middle of the road with his back to him, was a man. The lights of my father's truck bathed him, but the crashed car remained in shadow, its headlights dead. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound. It was just there. "Sir, are you okay? Do you need help?" my father asked, his voice echoing strangely in the vast desert silence. It was then that, from some deep fiber of his being, from that animal instinct that sometimes saves our lives, an alert arose. A cold pang in his chest, an imperceptible tug that stopped him in his tracks. He stood still, a few paces from the seated man. This wasn't normal. There was something wrong. "My head hurts badly," the voice came dry and rough like sandpaper. "It's killing me. Please help me." My father's impulse was to approach. He was a helpful man. But the man didn't turn. Not an inch. He didn't try to get up, made no gesture to look at him. It was as if the pain paralyzed him, or as if something else prevented it. A layer of skin that shouldn't be broken. The silence stretched, an elastic band about to snap. "Please help me," the figure repeated, his voice a little louder now, but still without a hint of emotion or movement in his posture. It was in that instant that my father, his gaze already sharpened by unease, focused on the crashed car. And the first crack appeared in his perception of reality. The car didn't look real. Not in the solid, tangible sense of the cars he knew. It was like an imitation, a crude replica made of shadow and inconsistent matter. As if a child had hastily drawn a car, and then someone had given it a three-dimensional form with cheap clay. The more he looked, the more incoherent details emerged. The crooked lines, the reflections that didn't behave as they should, the slightly wrong proportions. It was the silhouette of a vehicle, yes, but an empty silhouette devoid of a mechanical soul. A sham. As if an invisible signal had been sent, as if the curtain on its charade had been drawn, the man sitting on the ground shot up. And he turned. What my father saw then, he told me, was like witnessing a nightmare in slow motion. As if a crime against nature itself was rushing towards him down an endless corridor of darkness. Something was wrong with the man's face. It wasn't a wound, not a scar. It was an absence. Something that shouldn't exist. A raw, animal scream tore from my father's throat. His mind, the rational part, was still trying to comprehend, but pure instinct, the kind that smells carrion and flees the predator, already knew. That was not a person. And his life, what little he had left on that cursed road, depended on running. He ran. Back to the illusory safety of his truck, his heart pounding like a crazed shaman's drum. He reached the door, slid into the seat, and just as his hand reached to turn the ignition key, the corner of his eye caught a movement. Fast. Too fast. The man was there. He loomed at the window, his hands placed on the sides of the door, his knuckles pale. And now, any vestige of his previous disguise had vanished. It wasn't just something wrong, it was the negation of form. The face, it had no face. It wasn't a disfigurement that could be understood. It was an absence. Smooth, pale skin where eyes, a nose, a mouth should be. Like a formless mass of flesh trying, unsuccessfully, to emulate the structure of a human face. A mistake of creation or perhaps an alien creation. My father told me the word disfigured didn't do it justice. It was something so radically foreign to his vocabulary, to his comprehension, that he found it impossible to describe with words that made sense. He could only say, it had no face. At some point in his frantic escape, my father had locked the door. And he was thankful for that reflex, that minimal action that separated him from the incomprehensible. That thing was not human, but it had learned a trick or two. It tried to open the door again and again with a methodical, unnatural insistence. If it hadn't been for that simple lock, it would have succeeded. The engine roared to life, a sound that was music to his terrified ears. My father stomped on the accelerator, the wheels screeched on the gravel, and the truck rammed the fake car. There was no resistance. The imitation was knocked off the road with a disturbing ease, as if it were made of papier-mâché, or of the same fog from which it seemed to have emerged. He didn't know how he drove. Terror was a thick veil that had enveloped him, an icy fury that clouded everything. The next few miles were a blur of pure survival. Only when the uncontrollable shaking of his hands subsided, when the fury in his heart calmed to a more regular beat, did he realize. He was at his father's farm. And he had pissed himself. He never spoke of it. Not to the police, not to his friends, not even to my mother. The story became insisted in his soul, a truth too strange, too monstrous to be shared. To the world it was just a bad night on the road. For him, it was the night the veil was torn, revealing that there are things in the desert, under the indifferent stars of Arizona, that do not belong to our world. My father never understood how he managed to live through the following days. He changed his schedule to never drive that road again at night. He told me it was an act of heroism, one that no one would ever recognize. But he did it. And he told me, his son, on the threshold of his own departure, with a tear in his eye. The irrefutable proof that there are truths that not even death can silence.